What would you do if your parents forced you to marry a complete stranger? Even worse, she's a beautiful woman, but paralyzed from the waist down. Then, just a few weeks after the wedding, you wake up in the middle of the night and hear quiet footsteps in the house. But you live alone, with a wife who supposedly can't walk. I thought I was hallucinating. Until I saw the truth with my own eyes. And that's when everything began to fall apart, only to be reborn in a way no one could have imagined. My name is Ryan Carter, 29 years old, born and raised in Minnesota. I'm a software engineer, a job I neither hate nor love. My whole life has been neatly laid out: good grades, got into college, landed a stable job, no drinking, no rebellion, and most importantly, I always listened to my parents. I never thought that obedience would trap me in such a strange marriage. It all started when my father, Robert Carter, a conservative businessman in his 60s, called me home for an important dinner. As we sat at the table, he looked serious and told me that the Chambers family, a wealthy family from Houston, had once helped our family through a major financial crisis. And now it was time to repay the favor. "You're going to marry Emma Chambers," he said, as if he were laying out a real estate deal. "She's been paralyzed from the waist down since a car accident 2 years ago, but she's a good girl, strong, and needs a man who knows how to take responsibility." I nearly dropped my glass of water. "Dad, are you serious?" He wasn't joking. My mom was gentler. She said Emma was beautiful, well-mannered, and grateful that someone was willing to accept her. She also said I was too picky, and maybe my destiny was to bring happiness to someone like Emma. Destiny? I had never met her, didn't love her, didn't even know her, only seen a few pictures. And more importantly, why did I have to marry someone just because of some debt between our families? I refused outright. But the pressure didn't stop. My dad said if I didn't agree, he'd cut off all financial support, including the apartment I was living in. I was 29, sure, but I wasn't ready to fully stand on my own. I had never truly defied them. And maybe what broke me the most was the look in my mother's eyes. She didn't say much, just touched my hand gently and whispered, "Ryan, please. One day you'll understand why." I didn't understand, but I said yes. And so the wedding was rushed and held within 3 weeks. On the wedding day, I met Emma in person for the first time. She was wearing a white dress, sitting in a wheelchair, her long brown hair flowing down, her face delicate like a painting. When she saw me, she smiled softly, not forced, but somehow sad. "Hi," she said, her voice warm and unusually gentle. I just nodded. I didn't know what to say at my own wedding, to someone I didn't know at all, and couldn't begin to understand why I was being pushed into this life. After the wedding, we moved into a small house in the suburbs of Minneapolis, arranged by both families. No one else lived with us. Just me and her. I slept on the couch. Emma had the master bedroom. She didn't ask for anything, didn't complain, she just tried to make the atmosphere as pleasant as possible. And I lived like a ghost. I felt like a prisoner in a life I never chose. But then, one night, just 3 weeks after the wedding, I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps on the wooden hallway. It couldn't be Emma, right? I held my breath and slowly opened my door. And right then, everything I thought I knew about this marriage, and about Emma, began to crack. I stepped out of my room, my legs trembling slightly from the tension. The house was cloaked in darkness, with only a dim glow from the hallway night light. I stood still, listening to the erratic pounding of my heart. The footsteps stopped. I walked toward the end of the hallway, where Emma's bedroom door was slightly ajar. No sound came from inside. I gently pushed the door open, trying not to make a noise. The room was dark. The wheelchair was still in the corner, empty. A chill ran down my spine. This couldn't be happening. I stepped back, turning to head for my room, when a faint sound came from downstairs, the clink of a glass touching the sink. I slowly walked down the stairs, heart pounding like a war drum. The kitchen light was on. And there, Emma was standing, her back to me, pouring water from the filter. She wore a silk robe, her hair cascading over her shoulders, standing steadily like someone who'd never known disability. I froze. It took me a moment to find my voice. "Emma?" She startled and turned around. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Her eyes widened in panic, and then, as if all strength had left her, she collapsed to the ground, her legs extended, unmoving. I was just getting some water. I didn't know you were awake." I walked closer, my heart still racing. You were standing. I saw it clearly." She was silent. 1 minute. 2. Then tears started streaming down her face. "Ryan, please, don't say anything. I'm begging you." I knelt beside her, confused. "What is this? You can walk? You've been lying to me this whole time?" She wiped her tears, trying to speak through sobs. "I used to be paralyzed. A car accident when I was 24. The doctors said I'd never walk again. But I couldn't accept that. I trained for 2 years. Physical therapy, every day, every step, and eventually I stood up again." I swallowed hard. "Then why are you still pretending to be paralyzed?" Emma didn't answer right away. She looked at me with eyes full of shame and despair. "Because of my mom. My family. They thought if I was still disabled, it'd be easier to find a responsible man. Someone they could trust to take care of me. And they chose you." I didn't know what to say. I felt angry. Not just because I'd been lied to, but because I'd been treated like some kind of bargaining chip. "You were part of the agreement between our families," she continued. "You're kind, decent, with a stable future. They believed you'd never abandon a disabled wife. And if you didn't know I could walk, you'd stay." I stood up, feeling like the floor was shifting beneath me. "So, all of this was just a setup?" Emma nodded slightly, then shook her head, tears streaming down. "Maybe at first, but I never wanted to deceive you. I just didn't know how to get out." She clenched her hands tightly. "I thought I'd tell you after the honeymoon. Then I thought, maybe you'd get angry and leave. I didn't know what to do anymore, Ryan. I'm so tired of living in this lie." I sat down on a chair, my mind spinning. Everything I thought I knew about this marriage, about Emma, was unraveling. Part of me wanted to scream, break something. But another part, seeing her curled up on the floor, trembling in fear and shame, stopped me from hurting her further. I sighed. "Emma, we need honesty between us. I don't know what the future holds, but from now on, I want the truth. No more hiding. No more pretending." She looked at me, eyes searching, uncertain if she could believe. I reached out to help her up. Whether she could stand or not. I knew that tonight, we had both crossed a line we couldn't return from. But what I didn't know was, the truth of tonight was only the beginning. Since that night, the atmosphere in the house changed completely. Emma no longer hid the fact that she could walk. In the mornings, she made her own coffee, fetched the mail by herself. At first, I wasn't used to it. Every time I saw her standing by the stove or walking up the stairs, something inside me twinged, like a wound that hadn't quite healed. But then I slowly realized, Emma wasn't pretending anymore. On the contrary, she was finally living truthfully. I had never seen her smile so much. Though at times, those smiles still carried a trace of hesitation, like she feared I might change my mind at any moment. We started talking more. Not just cold, polite exchanges like before, but real conversations. About movies, about books, about the dreams she used to have before the accident. Emma once wanted to be a teacher. She loved children. But after the accident, her parents forced her to quit school, to cut ties with the outside world. "Ever since I got in the wheelchair," Emma told me one evening as we quietly ate dinner, "people started treating me like I was made of glass. Like I had to be wrapped up, kept safe. But they didn't understand, the more they did that, the more I felt like I was disappearing." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and listened. Maybe for the first time in my life, I was hearing a woman open up completely, not trying to fix her problems, not playing the hero. Just listening. A week later, Emma had a long phone call with her mother. I couldn't hear what was said, but afterward, she went into the bedroom, shut the door, skipped dinner, and didn't respond when I knocked. The next morning, her eyes were puffy, as if she had cried all night. When I asked, she simply said, "My parents know. I told them I'm not pretending anymore. I'm going to live as who I really am." I stared at her. "And how did they react?" Emma gave a sad smile. "They said if I don't follow their plan, then I'm no longer their daughter." I clenched my fists, furious. I never even met her parents, but at that moment, I genuinely wanted to confront them. "That's insane, Emma. You didn't do anything wrong." "Not wrong," she said quietly, "but not right in their eyes. I'm no longer the daughter they can control." That night, for the first time since we got married, Emma came and sat beside me on the couch. No wheelchair. No distance. She just quietly sat next to me, resting her head on my shoulder. We didn't say a word. And maybe in that silence, I felt it most clearly. I no longer felt trapped. But it didn't stop there. 2 days later, I came home from work to find a luxury car parked in front of the house. Texas plates. A woman in a thick black coat and sunglasses was standing at our door, her expression cold. It was Emma's mother. She didn't greet me, didn't smile. She said only one sentence. "I need to speak to my daughter." Alone. I hesitated, but Emma had already stepped outside. She nodded at me, signaling it was okay. They went into the living room. The door closed behind them. I stepped out onto the porch, trying not to eavesdrop. But her mother's voice was so sharp I could still hear parts of the conversation. "You've disgraced this family. You really think that boy will stay after learning the truth? He's a man of honor you're not worthy." Emma's voice came back, stronger than I'd ever heard it. "I don't care anymore. This is my life, not your chessboard." A long silence followed. Then the sound of high heels pounding against the floor. The door flung open, and Emma's mother stormed out, her face full of fury. Before leaving, she turned to me, her gaze like a blade. "You think you know her? You don't know half the truth. And by the time you do, it might be too late." Then she left, without looking back. I looked at Emma. She stood there, trembling, her lips pressed tightly together. She didn't say anything more, just quietly walked into her room and closed the door. And that night, for the first time, I started to wonder, what is the half-truth her mother spoke of? Was there something Emma still hadn't told me? And if there was I truly ready to find out? After that tense confrontation with Emma's mother, our house fell into silence again. But this time, it wasn't the comfortable, safe kind of silence we'd known before. It was heavy, pressing down on the chest like a weight. Emma avoided my eyes. She no longer leaned on my shoulder, no longer smiled while making coffee. Every response was short. Every step she took seemed burdened by something invisible. I didn't ask right away. I had learned that some truths need time before a person is ready to face them. But 3 days passed, then 4. I knew I couldn't keep pretending nothing had happened. On the evening of the 5th day, while Emma was folding laundry in the living room, I walked over and quietly sat across from her. "Emma," I said slowly, "I'm not trying to force you to talk. But your mother left me with something, and it's been echoing in my head ever since." She paused, her hands still. She said, "I don't know half the truth. You know I'm not the kind of person who digs into someone else's past. But if it affects us, you can trust me. No matter what it is." Emma looked up. Her brown eyes were tired, but there was a flicker of gratitude in them. She folded the last shirt, set it aside, then straightened her back, fingers laced together on her lap. She took a deep breath, like someone about to dive off a cliff. "Do you remember? I told you I was in a car accident?" she began. I nodded. "Well, that accident wasn't exactly what I said it was." She bit her lip. "I wasn't the one driving. I was in the passenger seat. The driver was my ex-fiancé. I stiffened slightly. His name was Derek, the son of one of my father's major business partners. We were engaged through an arrangement. I didn't love him, but I wasn't strong enough to say no. On the night of the accident, I told him I wanted to call off the engagement. I said I couldn't keep living a lie. She looked at me, eyes glistening. He went insane. Started driving recklessly. And then, the car went off the road into a ditch. I woke up in the hospital, paralyzed from the waist down. Derek only broke his arm. My heart pounded. Did anyone else know about this? Emma shook her head. My family covered everything up. They didn't want the press to find out. It could ruin their reputation. Derek was sent abroad to recover and then just disappeared. I was locked up at home, forced into therapy, but never allowed to speak of it again. She lowered her head. That's why I've always felt like I didn't have a choice. After I recovered, my parents started planning another marriage for me. This time, with you, someone they believed would accept a disabled girl like me. I didn't know whether to be angry or heartbroken for her. It felt like part of my heart cracked, not because I'd been deceived, but because Emma had been chained to pain and control for years. Emma, I said gently, why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I was afraid if you knew, you'd think I was dangerous. I was scared that my past would make you not want to stay. I sat there for a long while. Then I reached out and placed my hand over hers. Listen, I said softly. I don't know who you think I am, but if you believe your past would make me turn my back on you, then you don't know me at all. Emma gripped my hand tightly. For the first time in days, she cried. Not the tears of fear or shame, but of release. A bittersweet relief. We sat there together, not needing many words. But that peace didn't last long. A few days later, I found an anonymous letter in the mailbox. No return address. Just one line typed neatly. If you really want to know who Emma is, go to this address. But be prepared, you won't see her the same way again. I stared at the words, my heart racing. And for the first time, I began to wonder if Emma was still hiding something from me. Something even bigger than what she had already revealed. I stared at the anonymous letter, my hand gripping the paper so tightly it crumpled. If you really want to know who Emma is, go to this address. But be prepared, you won't see her the same way again. No name. No greeting. Just a cold piece of paper with a haunting warning. I read that line at least 5 times. The address was clearly listed, a place I'd never heard of, about a 40-minute drive north of our house. I wrestled with it all evening. A big part of me wanted to toss the letter into the fireplace and forget it ever existed. But another part, the one stirred by the ominous words, kept whispering. There's still something she hasn't told you. The next morning, while Emma was still asleep, I quietly took my car keys and left the house. The route led me to an old suburban neighborhood, full of faded wooden houses, broken fences, and overgrown lawns. The address took me to a small, dark, 2-story house that looked like it had been abandoned for years. I got out of the car and approached. There was no doorbell. The front door was slightly ajar, as if it had been waiting for someone to come. Inside it was cold, the air thick with mold and dust. All the furniture was covered with old white sheets. I stepped into the living room, heart racing, not even sure what I was looking for. Then I saw it. A worn wooden box sat on the table, with an old photograph on top. In the photo was Emma, looking a few years younger, standing in the middle of a group of people. But what made me freeze was the man standing next to her, his arm wrapped around her shoulder. None other than Derek, the ex-fiancé she said nearly killed her in the accident. The back of the photo was labeled, Emma and Derek, engagement, March 2019. I flipped through more photos. Several showed them traveling, attending parties, hugging, smiling brightly. But as the pictures went on, Emma's expression grew more forced, and Derek's eyes, there was something wrong. Something possessive in them. In a small compartment at the bottom of the box was a copy of a complaint report. I picked it up and read quickly. Complainant, Emma Chambers. Accusation, physical abuse and psychological control. Accused, Derek Callahan. I shuddered. Emma had filed a report against Derek. But there were no court records. Maybe it never made it to trial. Maybe it was buried. Maybe she was forced to stay silent. I took the documents, the photos, and left the house with 100 tangled questions in my mind. That night, I came home late. Emma was sitting at the dining table, worry on her face. "Where were you?" she asked. I placed the wooden box on the table without a word. She saw it. Her eyes widened, her face went pale. "You went there?" I nodded. "Why didn't you tell me everything, Emma? Why did you say Derek was just an ex-fiancé? Why didn't you tell me you reported him?" Emma sank into the chair, as if her legs could no longer hold her. "Because I was ashamed," she whispered. "Because I didn't want you to see me as a victim anymore. I didn't want you to think I was weak, pitiful, or dangerous." I stepped closer. "No, Emma. What I don't understand is why you let me find out from someone else. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me from the start?" She looked up at me, lips trembling. "Because there's something else I haven't told you." I froze. "There's a reason my family hates me so much," she continued, her voice barely audible. "Not just because I want to live independently. It's because I know their biggest secret. And if I ever tell anyone, everything they built will collapse." I held my breath. Emma looked at me, her eyes filled with pain and fear. She grabbed my hand, ice cold in hers. "Ryan, if you still trust me, if you still want to stay, I'll tell you everything. But you have to promise, you won't walk away after I do." I looked at the woman sitting in front of me, the wife I'd married in an arranged deal, the one who had kept so much from me, yet now sat trembling, begging me not to leave. And I knew, whatever she was about to say would change everything. I sat down, my hand still in Emma's, feeling every bone in her fingers ice cold, as if the blood had stopped flowing. The room was dead silent. Only the ticking of the wall clock echoed like a heartbeat counting down. "I want the truth," I said softly. "Whatever it is." Emma looked at me for a long time, as if trying to measure whether I could handle what she was about to say. Then she began. "Do you remember what I told you about the car accident with Derek? That I woke up in the hospital, and he only had a broken arm?" I nodded. "That's true. But it's only part of it." She took a deep breath. "The truth is, I was the one driving that night. Not Derek." That sentence hit me in the chest like a punch. I opened my mouth to react, but Emma raised her hand to stop me. "That night, after I told him I was calling off the engagement, Derek lost it. He smashed a wine bottle, screamed at me, even threatened to leak private photos online if I didn't marry him." She bit her lip, eyes brimming with tears. I panicked. I ran to the car. I just wanted to get away. But he chased after me, yanked me from the passenger seat and forced me behind the wheel. I had never driven at night before. I was shaking so hard I couldn't see the road. And when he grabbed the wheel to stop me, I lost control. The car flew into a ditch. She looked at me, voice cracking. My parents arrived at the hospital not long after. They listened to the doctors, learned I was paralyzed from the waist down. And when the police asked who was driving, they didn't let me speak. They turned to Derek and told him to keep quiet. In exchange, they'd take care of everything. Goosebumps rose across my arms. They paid off the hospital, the police, wiped the record clean. Arranged for Derek to leave the country for a while. Everything was handled discreetly. But the price was... I had to stay silent. I couldn't say I'd been behind the wheel. Couldn't talk about what happened before the crash. Couldn't say a word about my family. My throat felt bone dry. So, you were forced to carry this secret the whole time? Emma nodded. I tried to end my life once. But I couldn't do it. I thought, if I could walk again, if I got another chance, I would live honestly, tell the truth. But when my parents forced me into marrying you as a debt of gratitude, I was shoved back into the role. And I was scared. She gripped my hand tighter. Scared of losing you. Because you were the first person who didn't see me as a victim or as part of some arrangement. You were the first person who made me believe I could live honestly. I was speechless. Not from anger, but from the flood of emotions crashing over me all at once. Emma, this doesn't change how I see you. But I need to know, does your family know you could expose all this? Emma nodded faintly. That's why my mother came to see you. They're afraid you'll find out and take me away from them. And if you speak out? I'm not sure what would happen. But they have enough power to ruin anyone. Even you. I stood up, paced the room, then stopped and looked her in the eyes. Then we have to leave. She looked up, shocked. I won't let you keep living in fear. We need to start over. Somewhere they can't reach us. Somewhere you don't have to pretend. Somewhere you can hold your head up high. Emma broke down in tears. But this time, it wasn't despair. 2 weeks later, we left Minnesota and moved to a small town near the Oregon border, a place where no one knew the Chambers family, where we could be ourselves. Emma started school again. I worked remotely. And in a little wooden house by the forest, we began rewriting our story. But the past, I soon realized, doesn't let go so easily. Because one morning, I got a call from an unknown number. A man's voice spoke. This is Derek. You really think moving away makes it all go away? She hasn't told you everything. Trust me, she's hiding something you can't even imagine. I froze, the phone burning hot in my hand. You want the truth? Derek's voice was steady, almost cold. Then meet me. Alone. Don't tell her. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. I'll be waiting at the old warehouse on the outskirts of Ashford. If you don't show, I'll take everything to the press. This time, no one can stop me. The call ended before I could respond. I sat there, numb, for nearly an hour, my thoughts spinning. I thought I'd known everything, the accident, the cover-up, how Emma had been manipulated for years. But now Derek, the man she once accused of abuse and attempted murder, claimed there was more. And what terrified me most was that he didn't sound like he was lying. The next afternoon, I went to the meeting alone. The abandoned warehouse sat in the middle of an empty field, surrounded only by wind and the eerie creak of rusted metal. Derek was already there, leaning against a steel column, his expression eerily calm. He looked older than in the photos, thinner, worn, but the dangerous glint in his eyes remained. I'm not here to fight, I began. I just want the truth. Derek nodded and tossed me a worn folder. Read it. Inside were copies of psychological evaluations from a private recovery center in Texas, for a patient named Emma Grace Chambers. I frowned. What is this? This was right after the accident. She wasn't sent there just for physical rehab. She was showing signs of severe emotional instability. Major depression. Impulse control issues. One doctor noted she had a pattern of deflecting blame and distorting truth under pressure. I clenched the folder. What are you trying to say? That Emma made everything up? Derek stepped closer, his eyes intense. She tried to run me off the road. That night I didn't grab the wheel. I begged her to stop. But she screamed, if I can't escape you, then we both die. I had to break the door and jump out just in time. She drove straight into that ditch. I stepped back. I don't believe you. Derek smirked. You don't believe me because you want to believe her version. But why do you think the Chambers family is so terrified of her talking? Because she's a victim? No. Because they know she's unstable. And if the truth comes out, they go down with her. I left that warehouse with my head spinning and a weight in my chest. For the first time, I didn't know who to believe. Emma, the woman I had started to love, the one I had chosen to protect, could she be hiding a darker side I had never seen? That night I came home. Emma was sitting on the wooden porch chair, knitting. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. But for the first time, her smile made me uneasy. Where were you all afternoon? She asked softly. I sat down across from her. I met Derek. Her smile vanished. Her hands froze. What did he tell you? I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her for a long time. I want to hear it from you. One last time. Was it true? Did you try to crash the car that night? Emma stayed silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she set the knitting down, clasped her hands together. You really want to know? I nodded. She looked up. And in that moment, her eyes, the ones I'd always thought were gentle, wounded, darkened, grew deeper. I used to think, if I died with him, it would all end. I really believed that. But when the car went off the road, I realized I wanted to live. She looked straight at me. Yes. I was driving. I made that choice. And no, I don't regret surviving. If he died that night, maybe you wouldn't even be wondering about any of this. My heart pounded, my throat tightened. And the therapy? The doctor's notes saying you distort the truth? Emma smiled faintly, no longer avoiding it. I wasn't okay back then. I'm better now. Because of you. I stood up. Took a step back. But you never told the full truth. You only shared the parts that were easier to hear. She stayed calm. Because you never pushed for the rest. I turned away. She didn't follow. Didn't call after me. Didn't explain. A week later, I left the town. No goodbye. I just couldn't live with someone I could no longer tell what was real, and what wasn't. I don't hate Emma. Maybe I still love her. But when love stands beside truth, and truth is a shattered mirror, I knew I didn't have the strength to keep walking alongside someone who was both a victim, and someone who challenged the very limits of conscience. What do you think about this story? Was Emma a victim, or was she hiding something darker all along? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more gripping family stories that will keep you thinking long after they end.